Just a helpful hint, these are conversations between adults intended for adults. There is the potential for some adult subject matter or adult language.
Hello. This is Danielle Ireland, and you are listening to Don't Cut Your Own Bangs. Today, I have the honor of interviewing a woman I've actually known for quite some time, but never got to sit and appreciate her expertise in the field of registered dietitian. Lauren Rieker is the owner of Collab Counseling. It's a private practice filled with dietitians and mental health therapists intended to help women get out of food jail. She promotes intuitive eating, and she and I talk about her own relationship with food. We talk about the difference between having disordered thinking with food and an eating disorder. We talk about what that translates in terms of behavior, how we're impacted by culture, and what does it look like to actually stop trying to control our bodies and learn to trust ourselves. And my favorite part of the conversation, as I'm sure you will probably hear, is towards the end when we start to talk about satisfaction. I think understanding and defining a problem is an important part of the conversation. And then how do we begin to shift and move that conversation to something that feels aspirational and feels good, like actually feels like pleasure? And that's what we cover with our conversation around satisfaction. I'm so excited for you to learn more about your body and your own relationship with food here with Lauren. With that said, all the ways to contact her, to connect with her, to learn more about your body and your relationship with food with her help, hop on over to the show notes. We have her website, collabcounseling.com. You can also follow her on Instagram. That's where I got a lot of great nuggets for my own life at laurenrieker.rd. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I hope you're ready to sit back, relax, and learn with Lauren Rieker. There are a lot of experts out there. There are coaches, gurus, therapists, and everyone has a side hustle. Everyone has an opinion. And there's, while a lot of great content, also a lot of noise. What I have found to be true over and over again, whether it's in my own life or working with my clients as a therapist, the best person who knows the most about what you need is you. Journaling is one of the absolute best ways I have ever found to tap into that wisdom that lives inside of you. Maybe you need a ritual, some space, some quiet, and some support to really unlock some of those deeper learnings that you have inside of you that you just need to get reacquainted with. That is why I made the Treasured Journal. It's a 7-part guided journal that covers 7 different themes of your life. There are exercises, sentence stems, quotes, and short stories from other experiences I've had with clients that help jumpstart the thinking and the processing, but keep it absolutely personal to you. Be sure to click the link in the show notes and grab a copy of your Treasured Journal today. All right. Thank you so much for being here, Lauren. I'm thrilled to introduce our listeners to you specifically. We're going to jump into, I think, a lot of important conversation as it relates to body, wellness, culture, and how that all layers on women specifically. But I just want to welcome Lauren Rieker, RD, registered dietitian, to Don't Cut Your Own Bangs. She's the owner of Collab Counseling, and she wants to help women get out of food jail. And we're going to talk about what food jail is and hopefully how to get out of it. But I just want to say thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for having me. I am very excited to be here.
Yay. So I want to give the listeners a little bit of context with how we met. So Lauren and a friend of hers partnered and created a group locally in Indianapolis called The Hive. And it was this really beautiful collective to feature women locally from the Indianapolis or like Indy area, featured in a indie-owned business, and that invite other women in the community to come connect, learn. It was like more than networking. It was really building a hive, right? Building a group of women to share their insights, their strengths, their talents, their services with one another and build community. And I had an opportunity to get to speak for your event once myself. And then I was on a panel and a different event. This was all pre-COVID, I should say. So I had worked with you sort of before I even really knew what you did. And once we started working together through, or rather when I worked for you through the Hive, it was then that I started following you on social media and started seeing the work you do. Follow Lauren Rieker and Collab Counseling on all the social media platforms because she drops these beautiful, well thought through research and clinically based truths about women, food, and our bodies. And I would just see these posts and sometimes they would just like knock me in the gut in a good way. I went from being really grateful to have the opportunity to present to the Hive, but then I really became intrigued by the work you did and wanted to learn more from you in a completely different way. So I'm really, really excited to get to share more of your knowledge base with everyone who listens.
Well, thank you so much. Those are very kind words and very validating because as you probably can relate in a lot of ways as a creator and nothing that I went to school for necessarily. And when you put your work out for the world to see, it feels nice to hear, on the other end, what you're seeing. And I really appreciate that.
Well, I want to share with everyone one of the quotes from a post that you did, and I want to read it to you, and then I want to talk to you more about it. If you're feeling out of control with food and also trying to control your body size, weight, or shape, the problem isn't you. The problem is feeling the need to change your body. I need you to tell me more about that. I had to read that not because I didn't understand the words, but because there was a deeper understanding. Like I would read it and then I would reread it and I saw myself in it. I saw clients in it. I saw friends in it. And there were these flashes of memories of things that I've heard women say about they didn't want to say, I want to be skinny. What they said is, I want to get healthy. I want to do a cleanse. Mm-hmm. I should have written these down too, because I can't recall them all in the moment, but they were using language that wasn't really speaking to the truth of what they were doing, which was wanting to get small.
Right.
That's, fitness, health, really for women, the unspoken agreement is small.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's true for everybody all the time, but a lot of the time, probably more often than not, that is what it means. And your post framed that truth in a really eloquent way. And I'd love for you to tell me more about that.
And I think like you and like so many, it's hard to hear. And it's kind of almost triggering in a way because we are taught that we're supposed to control our body weight, size, and shape. And whether that's coming from an aesthetic standpoint or a health standpoint, with that, we're not taught to trust our own bodies. And so when our bodies are sending one message, but we're internally, but then externally, we're hearing all of these messages that we should not listen to our bodies, or send the message that our bodies can't be trusted, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah. So when you're saying when your body is sending you a signal internally, would you mean like hunger or pain, discomfort? So my body is saying, hey, I need some fuel, but your mind is saying, oh, but I was bloated and I ate Chipotle yesterday.
Right, exactly. And I think you bring up a good point is that we're not taught to trust our bodies, right? So on the flip side of that, we're also taught misinformation regarding what our bodies are trying to say. So bloating is a very normal part of digestion, but we're taught that bloating means that we did something wrong.
I need you to tell me more about that right now, because I did not know that. Okay, wait, so bloating is a normal part of digestion.
Yeah. Now, there's a time and a place, and if it's something that you are bloated consistently or associated with pain or discomfort or distension of the abdomen, then that's a different conversation. But if we're talking about occasional bloat, especially after something that you don't frequently eat or something here and there that resolves after, a few hours, that is very normal. But we are taught that it's a problem that needs to be solved. And it was a problem that we essentially caused for ourselves.
So what's happening in my body shouldn't be happening in my body, and it's my fault for it happening. So not only am I a problem, but there's then shame on top of the problem.
Yeah.
So how did you come to be who you are and do what you do? I know my path wasn't straight and narrow to to doing what I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
as a therapist or as a podcaster. That's for dang sure. So, but I'm really curious to know what led you here.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I struggled with my own issues related to food and body, I would say at a very young age. And we can potentially get into that or not. But at a very young age, I struggled with that. Grew up in a family that, we were very focused on sports and just being active. And I think that organically led to like nutrition and how to fuel your body properly. And so on top of that, I was obsessed with cooking and obsessed with trying new recipes at a very young age. And so I think I just had a passion for food.
Mm-hmm.
And then in high school, I got a job working at Curbs for Women, which is kind of where I fell in love with working with women and building that community. And from there, I do think that it kind of went from like a very positive part of my life, like building confidence and leading women, but to a point of being obsessed with what I was putting in my body. I developed what I would now know, I didn't realize at the time, what I would call orthorexia, which is an obsession with eating healthy and exercise. And so I struggled with that for several years, from high school up until, say, even as a registered dietitian.
I just want to interject for a brief moment because you've given me new language that I didn't have before. Orthorexia.
Yes.
I don't recall that being in the DSM. It doesn't mean that it isn't in the DSM, but this is fascinating. So it's an obsession with healthy eating. I'm using air quotes, like an obsession with healthy eating and an obsession with exercise.
Correct.
Can we clarify for the context of this conversation, as well as anybody listening, how do you define the distinction in terms of what's felt or experienced or behavior when there is a focus or a passion and disordered thinking and behavior? Where do you see that tipping point?
It's a really great question. And I think that there is a very clinical way of explaining, this is when we would diagnose. However, there's also just the lived experience way of explaining it. And I think a lot of times we just look at how is it impacting someone's quality of life. Ultimately, we look to make healthier choices or healthier ways of life to ultimately improve our life and ultimately help us be happier. And, that's the end goal, right? And I'm kind of just, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. But what we find is that a lot of times when people make these attempts to be quote unquote healthier, it's really impacting their mental health. If this attempt to become healthier or fitter or smaller or more toned, everyone has a different way of looking at it. There's that side of it, but there's also the healthism part of it. It's I'm doing this because ultimately I just want to improve my markers, whether that's, lab work or whatever. But sometimes people can just take it too far. I think what's really tough is that a lot of these behaviors are praised in our culture.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is that a lot of things that we would consider like someone having good self-discipline or self-control is oftentimes diagnosed as disordered eating or could potentially be an eating disorder. And I think the orthorexia is different when it comes to diagnosing someone, because there is more of the obsession of being healthy. And there still is a lot of that is tied into appearance, but not so much as, and I'm kind of flipping diagnosis here, but anorexia is not necessarily a desire for health.
Right.
But focused more on controlling size. For the most part, they are all, it's so hard when you're talking about this just kind of in a general sense, because so many of these diagnoses overlap.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think control, from what I understand, not specializing in the world you specialize in, but I'm sort of I interact with many people who are impacted or living with any one of the things that we're talking about. What it seems like is there's a little bit of self-deception. There's what I'm presenting, the goal or the desire. This is what I'm telling myself or other people this really is. And then there's another layer of, but this is what it really, really is. And that is, from what I understand, rooted in a desire to control something that whether it's external, internal, but control something, whether it's perception, a relationship, desirability, health, longevity, right? Control something. And I think I'm asking in part for my own personal learning, and also too, as just a person in the world with a body who's impacted by the culture and like all of the things. In something I read on one of your beautiful pieces of content, you applied it to your work specifically, but I reference this all the time in my own way. And I love that there's this intersection here. And I want to weave into this as we continue to learn more about how you got to do what you do. But this idea of control and trust, that we control what we don't trust. And so understanding what the problem is only one part of the equation. Then then what is the alternative? Not just controlling what I'm doing. Because what I see, for example, is someone who maybe has recently gotten sober. So they've stopped the addictive or, whatever the behavior is, let's say it's alcohol, but they're not really in recovery. They're not living recovery. They just have stopped drinking, and then they start running marathons, or they become really passionate about their church, or become really, really hyper focused on food and organic and non-GM. So the disordered thinking is still present. It's just manifested in a new place. And so it's like we're talking about food and body, we're talking about culture, and we're talking about when behavior becomes problematic. But I could imagine for anyone listening, it's like, and I'm sure you know this too, in your field, it's like, well, I've thought that, or I've done that, or I said that, like, am I in this problem? Like I have voices in my head. Am I schizophrenic? Like my mood swings, gosh, am I borderline? And I think the important distinction that you've made is that when it affects your quality of life.
Right.
But I want to go back to your story and how you become who you are and doing what you do. You were talking about, you were working at Curves, you were a trainer. The thing, you sort of wrapped a career around your own disordered thinking.
Yeah. And from there, and when I went to college, I worked at the rec center, and that's where I would say my struggle with food and body really took a deep dive. From there, from college, I worked at the YMCA of Greater Indianapolis, and I was a dietitian, and I traveled to all the different centers, and I loved my job. I got to meet a lot of different people, but essentially my role as a dietitian was to help people lose weight, and I mean, that wasn't necessarily like my tagline, but that's what people thought I was there for. And that's what I thought I was there for. I worked at the Y for a couple of years. I then went on to other endeavors. On the side, I had actually started Renovate Your Plate. Now, I was struggling, so it's very interesting, and I think that this is a commonality with other people in the health field, is that we are struggling ourselves, but we think that if we can help other people, then maybe that one is indirectly help ourselves. So
I just want to raise a hand. Like, I'm literally raising my hand like a kid in class, like, yes, 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 yes. I didn't start. So let me also share I didn't start going to therapy until I became a therapist. It has to do probably with codependence and people pleasing and the desire to rescue, and also too, my own fear of my own vulnerability, that it's easier for me to be the one to help than to acknowledge that I need help.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So I got the degree, started doing the work. And then it was when I was listening to people be incredibly brave and vulnerable that I started recognizing my own transference, my own like experiences were getting activated in my body. And that's when I realized, oh, damn, I got some work I need to do. And now the pendulum I may be a little too dogmatic about this, but I feel so strongly that if the people who are in helping professions are not getting the help that they are prescribing, there's a problem. And I know way too many clinicians that aren't in their own therapy. Yeah. And that feels so backwards. And I'm acknowledging my own hypocrisy that I started that way. Isn't it so interesting how like our own healing ends up being our medicine?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So help me. So when did you really become aware that the thing that you were doing was becoming a problem for you in the way you were doing it before?
Yeah. Well, I think what was interesting is, I mean, I knew I was struggling in college. I was in therapy, I was in treatment, but I was thinking that there was a difference between what I was struggling with and what other people struggled with. And I think that's kind of a common thing is when we think our struggles are like
Special,
we're a unicorn or something. Yeah. and so in college, I knew that I had a problem, but the ironic thing is I wanted to help people essentially have the same problem, which sounds I'm sorry, it's so fucked up in so many ways, but
it's so true though. It's so true.
Yeah. And I don't think I've ever actually articulated it in that way, but I was thinking that having an eating disorder or having disordered eating was different than like controlling your body weight, size, and shape. Like that was on the other end of the spectrum, and that I could help people do that. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going, and I don't think that all people that want to change their body weight, size, or shape that's not what I'm implying here, but I just really had I had compartmentalized the two. So I was working the Y, and then from there, I worked for several wellness companies. I worked for like a local hospital that had a wellness company for a trekking company. And so I worked with truck drivers and also the admin at this business. And so that really opened my eyes up, to a even more diverse population. And so while I was at that job, I started to really do the work. I mean, I was in recovery, but I was like, to kind of your point earlier, like I was really doing the internal work at that point. And that's where I stumbled upon intuitive eating. And I was working on it on my own. And then I ended up kind of taking it to my clients and taking it into the work I was doing with my clients from there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that's where the true passion started of like, you don't have to help people lose weight. Like you don't have to be a conventional dietitian. You can help people trust their bodies and learn to, just like how you essentially are kind of, in recovery and how you are helping yourself, you can essentially help those people that are also struggling. And so it took me a while I was straddling the fence for a long time. I knew that I wanted to go into private practice. I had no idea what that looked like. I got super lucky. One day I saw a job posting, 2 mental health practices here in Indy were hiring a dietitian. I had 0 experience when it comes to eating disorders. They were looking for someone to help take on clients that were struggling with disordered eating and eating disorders. And I showed up for the interview and I was super honest. And I was like, I have no experience, but I've struggled myself and I'm open to any trainings, any resources. And they sent me home with like a stack of books and they're like, take some time, do some research. And that was like in October of 2015. I'll never forget. And they're like, if you want to start, you can start in January 2016.
Wow.
And so that's how I got started. And I worked for I worked for one practice for 3 years, and I worked with Mindful Me, who I ended up merging with. So my private practice, Renovate Your Plate. And I've missed nuggets here, but I think what's most important is that my private practice, Renovate Your Plate, joined forces with Mindful Me in 2021. Through Renovate Your Plate, I had 2 dietitians and a therapist on my team. And then Mindful Me had a couple therapists and another dietitian, and we just joined forces. And now, since we joined forces, we have 8 dietitians and 5 therapists.
So there's a couple of things. One, I didn't realize that we started in private practice at the same year. 2015 was for me as well. That's what a fun little synchronistic moment.
Yeah.
And congratulations on what you've built and accomplished in that time. That is no small thing, because I looked at your website and I saw all the staff and I was like, damn, that is impressive.
I should say that we're not, what's really cool about our practice is that we're we're all women and we're all moms for the most part. So everyone's very like part-time. So when you have a lot of part-time people, you need a lot of people.
Yeah, no, it was beautiful. Your website's great. The content's great. I'm sure there'll be people that are curious about that after they listen. The other thing though, you've made a distinction a couple of different times between an eating disorder and disordered eating. Can you help me understand what the difference is?
Yeah, and there's a lot of gray. So I just want to say, like, as a dietitian, I do not diagnose necessarily, but that's why we have a team with a therapist and a dietitian, why we recommend working with both. So disordered eating, it really comes down to how they feel about their lifestyle or how they feel about their behaviors. Like, what do they find problematic, and how is it, to my point earlier, like impacting their quality of life? And to which that degree kind of determines, are we talking some disordered behaviors? Are we talking like this is controlling your whole life?
So like, am I abusing alcohol on a regular basis? Am I dependent on alcohol? Because I think that is, I think that's absolutely fair to say, and certainly more honest when we acknowledge in the health or mental health space, the gray, because there are inherently problematic behaviors. And then there are behaviors that on the outside externally are not problematic at all, but how it responds to my body, in my mind, how I internalize and interpret that information can be problematic for me. So like, for example, not to get too broad. So like, as I'm listening to you speak and as I followed your content for a while and as I've done my own work, there are certain aspects to my own relationship with food and body over the years that I could see like, ooh, I was probably flirting with a line when I was doing X, Y, or Z, the same way when I was 23 and could go out to bars and consume alcohol legally. I probably like, ooh, I definitely flirted with some lines there too. But what I know about myself is that knowing what I know now, there have definitely been times in my life where I've fallen into a depressive state and I've become so stimulated and vigilant that I'm living in an anxious state. And so when I'm out of touch or not aware of where I fall in that peak and valley, my problematic behaviors that maybe normally would not be, like my relationship with TV, my relationship with social media, my relationship with alcohol, my relationship with food, my relationship with other people, how I relate to all the things in my life can be heavily influenced by where I am in that line. So I can definitely relate in some ways, though I don't know. And I don't know how anyone in this culture, or should I say any woman, doesn't have some disordered relationship with food and body.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like if the toxicity is in the air and we're all breathing the same air, then we all have some level of this.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when people talk about misogyny or the patriarchy or racism. It's like, we're all swimming in the same soup. And so I think it's so easy, but also limited to so quickly say that isn't me before acknowledging a harder truth, which is whether you are all in on this, or maybe you're not in, like what you have a desire to be and how you're impacted by the world you live in. I think those are different, and kind of acknowledging the gray that you're talking about. So I know this affects me, and I'm trying to understand how and in what ways it affects me. Because I tell you, there are some of your posts that I'm like, oh, that was a punch in the gut.
Yeah.
So how would you, let's say you're working with a client, she's saying all the things that you've heard a million times. My guess is you probably have like 3 things you hear women say every time you see them. You know, I just want to get healthy, or I just want to get back into the jeans that I was able to wear a couple of years ago, or, whatever the things that are code for, I need to be smaller.
Right.
Where does intuitive eating and trusting yourself, where does that recovery, like, how do you even introduce that to someone where, like, I don't know what the statistic is, but it seems like girls begin to not trust their body and they look to the world to tell them how to be and who to be around somewhere between like 8, 9, and 10.
Right.
Because we're just more social. We're in school, we're becoming more socially aware. We're looking to the people next to us to see what they're eating and how they're behaving and what they're wearing and what they're doing. And so how do you turn that focus in?
Well, it takes a lot of time. I think it really depends on the beginning of my career when I was a conventional dietitian. And when I say conventional, what I really mean by that is like weight centered, where the goal essentially was body focused. And whereas now I think we are a little bit more direct in our messaging in regards to like who we see, and that we just really make sure before we take on a client, like, just so you know, we do not focus on weight loss as an end goal. It may be a byproduct of focusing on behaviors. However, we have found, every single clinician on the team, that focusing on weight does not lead to better health outcomes. Instead, we focus on behaviors and we do not treat body size. And so for there, we kind of weed out the people that if they're really, really wanting to focus on weight loss, we're not for them. We're here to help people heal their relationship with food. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have clients that are very honest with saying like, yeah, I would love to lose weight, but I also recognize that the problem's not the problem. Like, I understand that maybe the desire to lose weight is why I feel the way I do about food and body stuff. So most of our clients are very honest and open about knowing that it is a desire, but part of what we do is helping them kind of understand what is your lived experience with having a goal of weight loss, or what is your lived experience with feeling like you have to run a marathon twice a year, or whatever.
I love that question. What is your lived experience in the pursuit of this goal? And I'll try to answer it myself, because again, like some of these concepts we're talking about, sometimes they can get so vague and sort of like blurred that I never thought about weight. Like my insecurities were like more specifically about acne when I was young and having this like untamable head of Hermione Granger hair from Harry Potter. My body in that way was, I could say I was lucky. That was never a focus. I moved through life. I was very active, high metabolism, dance. And I just, again, moved through life never thinking about food and weight and size. Flash forward to when I switched from being a ballroom dance instructor to going to graduate school, from moving all day to sitting and living in my head. And slowly over time, and then also started the journey of wanting to conceive and have a baby and hormone fluctuations and being pregnant and miscarrying and then getting pregnant the next year. There was this 6-7 year span where my body stopped looking like something I could recognize. And then I started to feel out of control. I was like, wait, hold on. This isn't, I'm not used to this. And so I could feel the pendulum swing internally from, this doesn't look like the body I'm used to. I don't recognize this, and it would swing. And so I would overcorrect. And then I need to control because I'm feeling out of control. The result needs to be control. And every time I would approach my body or my life that way, this is also, I don't know if this is true for everyone, but certainly true for me. Whenever I create I'll say a rigid, like discipline actually is kind of it's a very activating word for me. I wouldn't call it triggering, but it's very activating for stress.
Yeah.
Discipline, because it's also very shaming, because if I don't follow the rule to the letter, if I don't get the A+ with my rule, then I'm failed. So it really doesn't serve me well at all. I'm flooded with adrenaline.
Or many people.
Oh, good. I'm so glad I'm not alone. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Yeah. But so I would create these rules, or I would try a cleanse, or, Whole30, paleo, juice, all these things. And also somewhere in there are behaviors that I live by about 80-90% of the time. But it's specifically those moments where I'm like, I'm out of control, harsh, course correct. And it would live in short bursts, like a sprint versus, and I'm not a runner, so this maybe is a poorly tied in metaphor, but I would have the short burst of adrenaline, like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do XYZ ridiculous goal for myself. And then it was unsustainable and then unattainable. Yep. And then I would feel like shit. And then I would just sort of double down on the behaviors that weren't serving me. And then I just felt worse and worse and worse. And so I kind of went through this internal swing, and externally, I probably didn't look any different to anybody, but it felt awful. And I was able at that time in my life to relate to people in my life who were struggling or had struggled with food related issues in a way that I just couldn't before. But going back to control and trust, because that to me feels like the key to everything really, is that we unlearn our true nature to adopt the rules of a culture. And but what we risk, because I think there are true risks if we just let ourselves be. I think our fear underneath that is letting ourselves go. And I'm using big air quotes there, letting ourselves go. If I just eat what I want when I want. But it's true for anything. If I just let myself live in a way that makes me happy, I think that's where the ego goes in our mind. It's like, well, if I just let myself live life, then I'm going to fucking fall apart. Why I need these rules? When I actually focus on trust, that's never, ever true.
Yeah.
Tell me more about trust.
You're making such great points. And I think to your point of like feeling like your body is changing, we are taught to fix it. And that can be really problematic because the bodies are meant to change. And we're not taught that. We're taught that it's really not okay to be the same size your whole life. Like that just is not normal.
I need you to say that. Say that again. Our bodies are meant to change. Will you print that on a t-shirt so I can buy it?
For sure. Yes, that's a great idea. And then we'll put our initials on the back too.
Yes. Our bodies are meant to change. That needs to be a mantra I speak more. Like, because bouncing back.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Bounce back culture is problematic. So toxic. Think about all the seasons and phases of our lives that we go through. And not to mention, as we age, our body composition is designed to change. But we are taught that that's not how it's supposed to be. And so we're fighting against nature and biology. And that can be really, really tough. And so when you come to, and I think this is what we work with our clients on so much is like body acceptance, more so than body positivity, because the truth is that we're probably not going to think that our bodies are the sexiest creature on the planet. Like that's just not what we're aiming for. We're just aiming for to feel safe in our bodies. I mean, that's essentially what we're aiming for our clients is feeling safe. Or maybe you don't feel safe, but how do we prevent you from punishing it because of that? So through that process, there's a lot of body grief because when you're taught that your body can be manipulated and controlled, and it should be, and then when you kind of come to that realization, like, actually, no, our bodies are not designed that way, there's a lot of grief and mourning that can take place, and it can be very healing, but challenging nonetheless. These are all very vague ways of explaining it because everyone's situation is different, and it really depends on their starting place and also what people are willing and able to do. But our ultimate goal for clients is to get to a place of just normal eating. Normal eating is very convoluted in our culture, as we've kind of explained. And so we call it intuitive eating. And intuitive eating is 10 principles focusing on relearning and reconnecting to your body's cues. It's essentially a framework, a way to heal your relationship with food, unlearn what you've been taught, to kind of reconnect. And whether that is hunger cues, learning to be comfortable with foods in your house is another example. We're taught that if you are eating too much of something, then you just need to take it out of your house. So a big principle is making peace with food. And in order to really learn and be able to listen to what your body is needing and wanting, you have to unlearn all of those rules that you have kind of established throughout your life. That's a very quick and dirty version of what intuitive eating is. And like I said, not everyone is ready to jump right into intuitive eating because in order to intuitively eat, you have to have hunger cues. So we can always present the information and people can try to start applying the principles without necessarily having hunger cues. But one thing that a lot of dietitians on the team will do with clients is working on a flexible meal schedule. So getting clients to eat regularly, consistently, that will help reverse those lost hunger cues. Because if you've been dieting, even for a short period of time, but a lot of people have been dieting their whole life for one reason or another. It could be for weight loss purposes, but it could also be for, medical purposes. They've been told that they need to lose weight for a specific disease state. So no matter what the reason why someone is restricting can cause hunger cues to quiet down. So if you don't have those hunger cues, it makes eating really challenging because not only you don't know when to eat, you don't know what to eat, and you're just second guessing yourself. So eating consistently and eating adequately is a way to get those hunger cues back. And then once you get hunger cues back, it does make it a little bit easier to be like, oh, okay, now is when I should eat. But it's also not that black and white because there are times where we eat for enjoyment.
There's another word that you used if disordered eating or disordered relationship with food is on one extreme, then the other, like, so what are we moving towards? I think this maybe comes on the other side of trust. You use the word satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
Satisfied.
Yeah.
Because I, of course, there are people who run marathons and that fuels them. I don't understand those people. I'm friends with those people. I think I don't get it. It's not just the behavior, but what I'm hearing you say is like, it's how your relationship or how you're relating to that, how that makes you feel. And so the question, I think that in adding satisfaction into the story, are you satisfied with the choices you're making? Do you have that sort of rich, delicious feeling of, oh, yeah, because that's how I would describe, or a great descriptor to when you reach a place of truth, whether it's in therapy or in a relationship. Like, there are moments where even if it's uncomfortable in the pursuit of, or like it may not always feel good, but generally speaking, more often than not, you're satisfied. I can relate that to marriage. I can relate that to career. And I love thinking about that in terms of food, because it makes me think, I know that we have a mutual acquaintance, and maybe you two are more friends, but Tenoria Askew, who's been on the podcast, and she's an author and she's a chef, and she has such I'll say a rich relationship with food. And a lot of her cooking is rich, Southern soul food. And I love the language as well of soul food, because I think food is not just like, there is no nutritional need for chocolate cake that I have found, but my soul, my heart.
I would like to challenge that.
Oh, please. What? There's eggs. There's
there's carbohydrates, our main source of fuel.
Girl, you've given me the permission slip. Can we? Okay, let her eat cake on a permission slip, and let's put that on a t-shirt, and I will wear that too, because cake is my.
I think let her eat cake. I think that would sell. I do really think that would sell.
Okay, boom. We're doing it. TM. But cake. I love cake. Candy isn't my jam, but you give me a really well baked cookie, delicious slice of cake.
I mean, think about this. If you were going to go on a hike and you had this choice between a piece of cake or a kale salad, what do you think is going to fuel that hike better?
Which one's going to make you poop your pants in 5 miles?
Yes. There is so much nuance when it comes to nutrition, and people just do not. Yes, of course, the kale is offering tons of vitamins and minerals, but there's a time and a place for everything.
Yes.
Never pooping your pants. There's never really a time for that, but there is a time and place.
That shirt may not be as hot of a seller, but I like that. There's never a time to poop your pants. Oh my God.
Never a good time, right?
There's never a good time unless you're my daughter, and then every day is poop your pants day because you're still in diapers.
Same.
But there are days where the salad is good. But then I'll also acknowledge there are other days where I ordered the salad when my heart really wanted the burger. And all I'm hoping to do with conversations like this, or conversations about mental health or anything else, is inch the intersection between what I desire and what I do closer together. Because the more I do that, the better I feel and the better I look. And I'm not just talking about food, but I'm talking about all aspects of life. Saying yes to the thing I really want to say yes to as many times as I want to.
Mm-hmm.
But also I think it speaks to trust and satisfaction. Because I think if we have a relationship with our bodies that has been controlled forever, then trust feels kind of elusive and hard to define. But satisfaction, it's like our pleasure centers, what actually feels good, an actual orgasm versus a faked orgasm. Our satisfaction is felt. It's visceral. That is a word that makes a lot of sense to me. So thank you for that language.
Absolutely.
We've covered so much ground, but I would love to sort of wind down our conversation with your don't cut your own bang moment. It could even be something recently.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many. I mean, I think, maybe I'm being a little too cliche here, but I really do think that I think the reason why I sought out the career of going into dietetics was very vain. as a dietitian, that means that I eat perfectly and I look perfect and I can help other people. And if you like what you see, then I can, So I think but the universe had other plans. And I think I think I'm so grateful. And here we are. I'm helping people kind of unlearn that mentality I entered the career with. And so I don't know if that's a cut your bang moment, but it comes back full circle for sure.
No, I absolutely think that it is. You went into this job thinking it would lead you one place, which was a hot rockin' bod that you could teach other women to have. And what it led you to, or what you found on the other side, was, I want to help women feel satisfied. Which, think of like the difference. One is like a catchy pop song and the other is Beyonce. Like satisfaction. I mean, do I want to live a life where I'm thin? Do I want to live a life where I am satisfied?
And feel safe, comfortable being yourself,
We could probably pull on the thread of the power of that word satisfaction forever, but I don't know if you can achieve satisfaction without safety. Like that makes sense in terms of like a hierarchy of pleasure in sex or pleasure in relationships or pleasure with food. I don't know if we can access that. And maybe pleasure and satisfaction aren't exactly the same, but if we aren't safe first, how can we ever hope to get there? And I absolutely can relate to your don't cut your own bang moment, because I don't think I really was, I don't know if I fully acknowledged the partial truth. I know my desire by and large, as I'm sure yours was, to do the work that I do now and work in mental health, was to serve and be of service. And one of my core fears is not being seen as good enough or not being smart. And so it was the whole, like, having a master's, telling people this is what I did. It was an identity shift that definitely had some of that there. And it wasn't until I started actually digging in and doing it that I realized, there's more to this that I need to unpack. But I mean, I'm sure everyone has some version of that.
Right. Subconsciously. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Lauren Rieker, thank you so much for being generous with this hour and for just sharing your resources and your insight and your content. For everyone listening, all the ways you can connect with Lauren, collab counseling, just hop on over to the show notes, and all of her handles, links, website will all be listed for you there. I hope everyone listening shares this information so that you can continue spreading your great work. Thank you again.
Thank you, Danielle.